Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today. And it is finally here. This is it, guys. This is opening night of Ghostbusters Afterlife. And this is my review of the film. And just a very important note here, this will be a spoiler-filled version of my review. I already put out a spoiler-free version not that long ago, so if you want to learn about the film but don't want to know what happens in it, please watch that video instead. Stop this one right here. Do not go any further because, yeah, I'm going to be spoiling a lot of things in this one. Now, this video is basically coming out on opening day. How did I already see the film? Really, I don't even need to say it that way or present it that way. I kind of just want to humble brag for a minute here. But if you already watched my spoiler-free review, you know the story. But for those who didn't watch that one, I was one of those really, really lucky people who went to New York Comic Con this year, went to the Ghostbusters Afterlife panel, and was surprised with the entire movie. And I gotta tell you, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about that day. Because, really, that was Friday of New York Comic Con. It was my second day there, and I was really overwhelmed, really busy, because I was doing work for another client. And yeah, I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it to the Ghostbusters panel because I was just feeling so kind of overwhelmed and stressed. And then I got there and the line was like enormous, really, really huge line, but it was in a brand new building at the Javits, and they assured us that all of us would get in. And yeah, we did. And the panel was really cool because we got to see all of the actors from the film. They all answered a few questions. Really nothing too crazy or spoiler-filled either, but it was just nice seeing them, seeing their personalities, and we'll talk about that a little more as we go into this review here. But yeah, it was just really cool. And then about 30 minutes into that panel, Jason Reitman was like, all right, well, we're going to show you guys some clips now, but we've decided that you've waited long enough, so sit back and enjoy. And that was it. Lights went dim. Security came up out of nowhere. Like, tons of security just basically swarmed that area and patrolled the entire night to make sure nobody was taking film or photos or anything. And yeah, I got to see Ghostbusters Afterlife, and wow, you guys. So now here we are with the film released domestically in the US, and depending on when you watch this, whether it's opening day or a week from now or even months or years from now, whatever it is, Ghostbusters Afterlife is finally here, and I can finally say everything I want to say about it in that spoiler-free review that I couldn't because spoilers. So let's just jump right into things. I'm going to answer the same question I answered in that spoiler-free review as well. Is Ghostbusters Afterlife a good movie? Yes, yes, yes. Oh my god, yes. Daniel Bryan, yes. That's how much of a yes it is. Ghostbusters Afterlife is the perfect sequel that we've been waiting for. I'm going to mention Ghostbusters 2016 throughout this review in a lot of ways. This will probably be the first time I do it here, but there's a lot of parallels to draw between these two films. It didn't really feel the same. I mean, it basically was a whole new installment in the Ghostbusters universe. Ghostbusters Afterlife is that straight shot, that straight continuity arrow that continues Ghostbusters, and really it takes place essentially, yeah, you could say it's right after Ghostbusters 2. It kind of just picks the story up, not necessarily immediately, but it kind of moves into things. So, let's kind of just do a quick little story recap again, just because why the heck not? So at its core, Ghostbusters Afterlife is basically a few different types of genres in one movie, which is also what the 1984 version, the original version of Ghostbusters, did too. It was a hybrid film that took elements of comedy, of horror, a little bit of action, some supernatural stuff in there too, and made it into one really different and unique movie for its time. And Ghostbusters Afterlife is doing very much the same thing, and granted, Ghostbusters kind of broke some rules when it first came out. Ghostbusters Afterlife isn't necessarily breaking any rules, but it's doing a great job of just combining some different things that you might not think would fit together that well. Ghostbusters Afterlife is, of course, a comedy. It's still a horror movie. It's got some elements of action also. I'd say definitely more than the original 1984 film. But the one thing that the new film has that the other films haven't had was an element of family drama. And that's something that Jason Reitman is really good at. If you look at his list of films, even just going back to Juno, in fact, that was my first ever exposure to Reitman's work. His stuff is very much about family dynamic, family units, different elements and ways that families happen and come together. And Ghostbusters Afterlife is truly a family story. And I think that was something that Jason spoke about very, very early on, even like 2 or 3 years ago when he was first talking about the film and what the plans were for it. He was mentioning how it's going to be like a family story. And I was like, how? What? How is this going to work? And having now seen it, I totally get it. And it's brilliant what he did. We basically have all these different stories that kind of start in separate places, all these essentially displaced family members, if you will, some in an actual family, others in their own different families. And as the stories go along, they all meet at some point, come together, and that is how we get Ghostbusters. So in case you couldn't tell, obviously, yeah, I think the story was excellent. I thought it was really, really cool how it was paced also. But yeah, just as far as the plot elements go, just very good. Really just how everybody came together, found each other. It really worked out well. I was kind of concerned about that too, because you do have a lot of characters here doing different things. And once the movie begins, you really kind of see how everybody's relationships are strained and off in different areas. And that's what this movie is about. How they find each other, again, just felt very natural. It felt like it really fit into everything nicely. They were like puzzle pieces that came together, and it made this really great puzzle, which is, of course, Ghostbusters. Carrie Coon, Paul Rudd are great as the adults, for lack of a better term. I'm just going to call them the adults here. But, they have really good rapport on screen together. And Carrie's role is actually a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be, if you really think about it, because she's playing a mom, doesn't really know much about her own family history. She's struggling with a lot of things. She has 2 kids she barely understands. I feel like she really made it feel, honestly, very realistic, and I just use the word honest, but now as I say it, yeah, it felt like a very honest portrayal of a person that would be in that situation. It's not an easy role, but I think it's like one of those roles that it's really easy to screw up. But she did a wonderful job with it, and same with Paul Rudd. His role, of course, is a lot more goofy, a lot more silly, but he also felt grounded in reality and real. And that's something that didn't happen in Ghostbusters 2016, where the characters all kind of felt like they were straight out of The Office, or they were just comic book villains, or whatever else they were. Of course, the real stars of the film are the kids. That would be Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Celeste Connor, and Logan Kim. And they are all amazing as well. Great rapport together. Finn, we already know, has got the chops. Finn is great. McKenna Grace, I didn't know much about her before this either, but man, she is a powerhouse. She's going to be great. And I love her version here of Phoebe. Phoebe is such a badass character. Everybody always draws comparisons to, is this character Ripley? But I think Phoebe is going to be like the new Ripley, especially as Phoebe goes on and continues her story, hopefully. Man, she's such a badass, awesome character. And again, finding her way like everybody else is in the story too. She's really trying to find who she is. And, we've seen some inklings of who that is, and that's really awesome. Celeste Connor, I feel like we don't really get to see her do quite as much as everybody else does in the film. It's in some ways she feels almost just like she's there to be the love interest, even though she is much more than that. Her and Finn work together as well very, very well. They have really good chemistry together. It feels real. I do hope that if they make sequels, which we'll talk about later on here, that we do get to see Celeste take a bigger role in the film, as Lucky. But, right now, for this version of the film, it was fine for what it was. I just kind of wish there was a little bit more of her. But, again, it's not to say she didn't do enough or whatever. I just kind of want her to be more than just the love interest. I think the real standout, though, besides McKenna, would easily be Logan Kim. And if you didn't know, this is Logan Kim's first thing ever. Basically, the only other thing he's done so far has been a commercial. That's it. One commercial. Ghostbusters Afterlife is his first big gig and really first professional gig outside of that commercial. And he killed it. He nailed this thing. He is such a standout. And he was also one of those things that I was very concerned about. Having seen the toys, having seen some trailer stuff, whatever, I was really worried that, here's this little 10-year-old kid. What's he going to bring to the film? How precocious is he going to be? No, none of that at all. He feels like a little adult, which is kind of funny about the character, too. He was really good. He surprised me, and just how good he is, too, at what he does. Man, this kid is going to be great. We've only seen the beginning of him here. Logan has a very bright future ahead of him. Cannot wait to see more podcast, the character who I thought I was going to hate. How's that for a review, Logan? I'm sorry, but that was my original thoughts, but you won me over. So yeah, awesome job. Everybody, all actors were amazing in this thing. And again, this is the spoiler-filled version here, so that means we have to talk about the originals. And yeah, we got to see Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray. Holy crap, we got Bill Murray in a Ghostbusters movie. Did hell just freeze over? Well, actually, if you read Dan Aykroyd's Ghostbusters 3 script, it didn't freeze over, it just got overfilled. But no, somehow they got Bill Murray to do Ghostbusters, and man, it was surreal seeing those guys in the suits again. But I think I want to come back to that point a little bit later on. But, acting great, no problems there. So one of the things that I felt Ghostbusters 2016 got wrong was way too much action, and really just the whole flow of how things went together. We kind of talked about the characters and how they came together. That was bleh. I think with 2016, action was really high on their list, and having lots of stunts and lots of CG and wire stunts and flipping around and different toys and different weapons. And thankfully, Afterlife doesn't do that. Afterlife does not fall in that same pitfall that 2016 did with various weapons and way too much stunts and action scenes. If you look at the original Ghostbusters film from 1984, they only really use the proton packs twice. There's a scene where they bust Slimer, the very first bust, and then there's the finale of the movie. That's it. That's really the only times you see those proton guns really used. Even in the montage that they do with the Ghostbusters theme song right after that first bust, you don't see them light up those packs. Ghostbusters 2 has a little bit more action because they were catering to a new, younger audience, but Afterlife has a good amount of action, but not overkill action either. For example, that final climactic battle in the 2016 film, they suddenly introduced, all these different weapons and things like that. No, there's none of that really here in Afterlife. There are two things that we'll talk about in a minute, but as far as, the action scenes go and the busting goes, just really great. And what was so great about it was that it added to the narrative of the film itself. It wasn't just action for the sake of action. Anytime they're busting a ghost, it has a purpose for the story, for the progression of the plot. You can argue that, yeah, well, busting a ghost is progression of a plot, but how does it actually fit into the overall narrative? And that narrative is, again, the family story. So how does busting ghosts all come together? Yeah, this is how it happens in Afterlife. Basically, as I mentioned, these disparate paths of all the characters converge once Muncher is discovered, and then we get Phoebe and Podcast in the Act 1, which is being driven by Trevor all around town, and they're busting Muncher, and that is such a cool scene. That also is the debut of the gunner seat, which is so cool. Oh my god, the gunner seat is awesome. And also the debut of the remote control ghost trap, which is really, I said Logan Kim was one of my standouts, but no, that remote control ghost trap is the standout. That thing has so much personality. I love that remote control ghost trap. I want a toy of that, so somebody get on that thing. I love that little thing, and that was such a cool bust. So yeah, let's talk about those action scenes. There is the Muncher scene, which is great, really good scene. That's the debut of basically all the tech coming together. It's funny, it's scary, it's tense, it's really, really good scene. We could argue that the next action scene would be when they discover Shandor's little mining area, where we get to see the return of Zuul and the first time ever showing of Ivo Shandor, which was so cool, by the way, seeing J.K. Simmons as Ivo Shandor. I was like, is that J.K. Simmons? And yeah, it was J.K. Simmons, because of course it has to be J.K. Simmons. And then there is the final climactic battle, which was, again, really, really great, very dramatic. And I guess now will be the time to kind of talk a little more about the Ghostbusters themselves and the original Ghostbusters show up to town again, as well as a major plot point, which would be Harold Ramis. So we all knew from the start that Harold Ramis would be a part of this film in some capacity. Egon had to be represented in some way. And we all speculated that Phoebe and her family were Spanglers, and that was, of course, found to be true. The movie opens with basically the passing of Egon, and it also kind of explains what the entire plot's going to be for the rest of the film. So it was a good setup, not just for showing what's going to go on for the rest of the duration of the movie, but also to just show us, here's Egon's last stand. And it does raise some questions, too, that get answered as the film unfurls. Like, what happened to the rest of the Ghostbusters? Why is it just Egon? What's he doing here? But yeah, it was really, really solid, very emotional scene. Like, for us ghost heads, this is like the beginning of Up, if you will. It was that dramatic, that kind of emotional for us. And then watching like the silent hand of Egon showing Phoebe how to find the ghost traps and things like that, and just like kind of building a spectral relationship, I guess, with her. And same thing with as well Carrie Coon's character. Just really, really sweet stuff there, and just like showing how, again, the family ties are really important, even though Egon maybe didn't quite know how to express that when he was alive. And we all know that the Ghostbusters kind of fell apart at some point because Egon was dealing with whatever was happening with Ivo Shandor. And seeing them all come together in the end was just really cool. Again, like seeing all the guys in the jumpsuits was just bizarre to me, but such a cool sighting. If I'm going to talk about a plot hole that kind of bugged me, I was like, how did they get there so fast and so dramatically on time? That was like one of my nitpicks about the film, was like, how did they all show up right when they needed to be there for that final climactic battle at the exact right moment that if they didn't show up, it would be the end of the world? That was a little too much for me and kind of almost took me out of how real everything else in the movie was. Because really, the movie is very grounded when you consider it's a movie about busting ghosts. It was also a movie about family dynamics. And up until that climactic battle, it really felt like it was just about that. And then suddenly it kind of turned into Ghostbusters 2 a little bit more so. Still didn't fall into the pit traps of Ghostbusters 2016, thankfully. But yeah, it was a little, I don't want to say far-fetched, but it kind of pushed my logic a little bit here. But it was so cool seeing them all back in action again. And when I say all, I don't just mean the three Busters. I also mean the actual ghost return of Egon Spangler. I'm getting goosebumps right now even just talking about that scene again, because like I got emotional watching that. It was, I even feel it right now. Yeah, like it was so cool seeing him on screen again. And they did a great job with the visual effects because it looked like Egon. It was perfect. Like they did it well. They didn't overuse it. It was perfect. It felt really, really emotional, and I know there was like not a dry eye in that audience that day. And since I already mentioned that nitpick I had with the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, just showing up in the nick of time, let's talk about one of my other kind of plot annoyances here, I guess, and that would be an overall general plot thing, in fact, and that would be how this film felt too much like a rehash of the original Ghostbusters. That part actually was kind of a major disappointment to me. Like, we all knew that Ivo Shandor and Zuul and Gozer would be involved in some capacity. It's just I didn't quite know how much they were going to really push that in and almost repeat the story from the original movie in a lot of ways. When that third act begins, we basically know that our big baddie is the same big baddie from the original '84 film. And not only that, but of course, because it is that same 1984 film, well, we got to get Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd possessed. And as fun as it was to see those scenes, and especially with the little mini Stay Puft, which by the way was like so disturbing and funny at the same time, that was like my Gremlins scene right there, like Gremlins 2. It just felt like it's cute, it's hilarious, and I don't want to see this again because my God, was that dark. That got dark real quick. But yeah, seeing Carrie Coon get possessed just like Sigourney Weaver, seeing Paul Rudd get possessed, basically just like Vince Clortho, except this time around it's, well, yeah, a little different. It was different because you had different actors doing their own versions of it, but yeah, it was still the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper, and why do we need to have that rehashed again? I kind of wish they did something else. I mean, on the other hand, I'm actually happy that Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd didn't pick up proton packs. I'm glad they kept that just to the kids. But, I kind of, as much as I enjoy how all the film elements come together, and it's fine, I can work together great, I kind of just wish they had done something different and maybe not relied so much on what the '84 film had planted the seeds for. I guess part of that was because they wanted to make sure that folks knew that this was the original Ghostbusters, not like 2016 where they kind of did their own thing willy-nilly, and then at the very end mentioned Zuul. It didn't really affect how I felt about the film, to be honest. It was just one of those things where I'm scratching my head like, are they really going back to the well already in this film series? So yeah, I would say those are really honestly my only two gripes by the entire film, believe it or not. Even the runtime I felt like a perfect runtime. I think it was probably similar, if not matched, to the original 1984 film too. I think it was also like 100 minutes. Don't quote me on that because I wasn't really timing the film. I couldn't really take out my phone to be like, all right, go, because there was security everywhere. But, again, it felt like pretty close. It was a perfect runtime. It didn't feel overly long. It didn't overstay its welcome like 2016. And start to finish, I was captivated about it. I mean, even though the fact that this film doesn't take place in New York, which is a big thing that I know a lot of folks are kind of up in arms about too, the fact that it doesn't take place in New York didn't make a difference. It kind of needed to not be in New York. It kind of needed to have a new place, a new environment, to kind of open things up and not let New York be a character, because in the original film, but even the sequel, New York is a character in itself too. So having the freedom to be in someplace new and still tell the same story, I think that's a really good idea. I think it's a great way that they did it. If I was going to draw any comparisons to other films, I mentioned Gremlins 2 as something. I think The Goonies also feels like a really big one here, especially when all the kids first get their gear on. It felt like such a Goonies moment to me. There's elements of all sorts of different movies here. There's a lot going on in this film. I think it's really cool for kids. It's going to be good for adults, good for hardcore fans. Perfect amount of jump scares, perfect comedy too. I felt like in 2016, one of the things I hated about it was the comedy. And that's because it felt like it was an episode of The Office. We had Paul Feig directing. He's known for doing some very, very great episodes of The Office. I feel like his direction didn't translate well into Ghostbusters because, while Ghostbusters originally had a lot of improv elements, they also had some pretty tight scripted things going into there. And they didn't let the guys keep talking on and on. Whereas 2016 was constant chatter, here's a joke, here's another joke, here's another joke, and it's all still one scene. If you rewatch it again, you can pick out any moment where there's meant to be some comedy there, and you'll see them just basically throwing darts and seeing what sticks to the wall. That's what 2016 felt like. Afterlife does not have that. Afterlife keeps it nice and tight, just like the original film had to do. They get their comedy, they get their emotion, they get a lot of high points in there. Really, it's just the perfect blend of all those different elements together. Is Ghostbusters Afterlife the perfect sequel? Yes. Is Ghostbusters Afterlife a perfect movie? No, unfortunately it's not quite as perfect as that predecessor we talked about so much lovingly in this review here. 84 is still a perfect movie. It's a textbook movie, honestly, for writing films and making films in general. I mean, honestly, if you do get any filmmaking or screenwriting textbooks, you're going to find Ghostbusters mentioned there because it was so perfect in how it was done, every level of it. Afterlife is an amazing movie. It's definitely one of the best things that Jason Reitman has done too, and he's done a lot of great stuff. But this one here, continuing the story that his father began decades ago, it's excellent. It's really good. It's what we've been waiting for, like I've said. When I first saw the Ghostbusters logo on the screen, I got goosebumps. I had goosebumps throughout the entire film. I was laughing, I was getting scared, I was crying. I mean, this thing has it all. I think if you're like me, who came from that same generation of Ghostbusters in the 80s, you're going to feel the same way I did. You're going to go through this roller coaster of emotions, and you're going to enjoy every minute of it. And speaking of every minute of it, I hope that you stayed for all of the post-credit scenes. So if you didn't, here's what you missed. The first one being actually a mid-credit scene, which would be that, apparently Dana and Peter got married, and that was hilarious, seeing them together. We finally knew for a fact that they did get together, and I love that Dana got her revenge on Peter for all the stuff he did at the beginning of the first film. And then if you stayed all the way to the very end of the credits, you got to see some pretty important exposition and possibly a setup for the future. So we learned that Winston has made a lot of money in finance, and we basically get to see a meeting between him and Janine discussing, what happened after the movie itself ended. And that's that Winston brought the Ecto-1 back to the firehouse, the original firehouse, and parked it in there. And, he brought it back home, as he put it. But that was not all, because as we pan down to the basement, we see the containment unit still in operation and blinking quite unhappily. So it looks like we got possibilities for a future movie. And now my question is, do I want to see Ghostbusters Afterlife 2 or whatever they're going to do next? Do I want to see them continue the story? Yes, absolutely yes. We need more of this cast. This was just the beginning. I want to see where this goes. And also because we didn't really get all the answers to the film. We learned, obviously, and we knew it from the trailers, that Phoebe and her family are descendants of Egon Spengler. But the question is, who did Egon hook up with to make this kid? So there's still some ground we didn't cover in 2021, and I hope that we get a sequel to go more in depth on that, to see how these kids continue to grow. I want to see what Jason Reitman's got next in him. I don't think anything he's done yet has had sequels before. I think all of his movies have been fairly self-contained movies. So I want to see how the story continues, where it's going to go next. I'll also be happy, honestly, to not really see as much participation from the original Ghostbusters. A little bit is fine, but I want it to be a true passing of the torch, so I want this movie to be about them. And I say that with confidence, too, because I feel like McKenna, the Finn, Celeste, and Logan, they all carry the film just as much as any of the adults did in the movie. So I want to see them continue to carry the franchise on their shoulders, not on the shoulders of Bill or Dan or Ernie or Harold or even Annie Potts. I want them to kind of do their own thing. That said, we need to get Rick Moranis in the next film somehow. He needs to show up, so that has to happen. But, really, I want to see the growth and the maturing of these other kids here, see what happens to them, see what their story is. That's what I'm really enjoying here. I'm liking seeing this new version of Ghostbusters that's kept the heart of the original in it. And that's really the best thing I can say about it, is that, yeah, it still has the heart of the original film, if not even more heart, honestly, than the original one did. Because, the original one was about a bunch of guys who basically start their own business, bust some ghosts, and Peter gets laid. This new film has real heart and honesty to it. And I think in some ways that makes the plot of Afterlife a little bit stronger than the plot of the '84 film, but the '84 film is still just overall, the perfect movie. So obviously I loved Ghostbusters Afterlife. If I was going to give it a numerical rating, I would probably say 8.5 or a 9 out of 10, with the original Ghostbusters, of course, being that perfect 10 of a film. I didn't like how some story elements from the original film were rehashed, as I mentioned, but otherwise, the whole thing was captivating. It was a real great ride. I loved every minute of it. They touched on a lot of the old stuff that I wanted to see as a hardcore fan. They brought in new elements that tied perfectly together. They had their own story. They did their own things. They found their own way. And I really liked it. I think you're going to love it too. And if you already saw the movie, which I'm hoping that you did if you just listened to this whole review, because, boy, I just spoil everything for you. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So please leave me a note in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Ghostbusters Afterlife. If you liked it as much as I did, if you didn't like some things, give me all the details, you guys. So that's it for Ghostbusters Afterlife. We got a few years to wait, I guess, until we get a sequel, if we even get a sequel. But I'm very confident that there will be another installment in this story, because really, you got to keep this going. I mean, you could easily end it right here, but let's keep it going, man. This is good stuff here. I want to see how these kids grow up. I want to see what's next for Ghostbusters, and really, I want this franchise to get kickstarted back to life again, because I need more toys, really. That's really what it is. I need more toys. But no, I love Ghostbusters, and really, this is something I've waited for decades, literally. And seeing it again on the big screen like this in a new way, and in a way that, really just takes the bad taste out of the 2016 film out of my mouth completely. Afterlife is near perfect, and it's a must-see film for Ghostbusters fans, and really anybody out there. You will like this movie. You will probably love it just as much as I do. I'm going to keep raving about how much I like it, apparently, so I need to just stop this review right here. So yeah, until next time, folks, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today. Thanks for watching. Bustin' makes me feel good, and I hope it makes you feel good, too.